I'm going to begin today by talking about the concept of good versus evil. So I'm philosophical today. Well, the three main monotheist religions of today, Judaism, Christianity and Islam, all base themselves on a Genesis myth that tells us that the discovery of the distinction between good and evil was the one-way ticket out of paradise. Now, personally, I think that sounds like a metaphor describing the problem with dividing the world into good and evil in the first place. But I think that most adherents to those religions seems to stick to that distinction with their lives and have fervently and maybe obsessively kept making that distinction for the last couple of thousands of years. Now, I don't know where the idea of such a duality started, but I do know that it by now affects the whole globe from society to individual. It is a drama that is being played out on every level. You have God versus the devil, you have the angels versus the demons, you have good versus bad people, light versus dark, and it's an idea that inspires countless dramas, both in real life and in fiction. Now, the idea of the battle between good and evil is an ongoing event affecting everybody, no matter what faith you adhere to. On the personal level, people often consider whether we are good or bad, so most people seem to want to be good people and often suffer from self-loathing and shame when they think they fail. Now, other people are so convinced that they are good people that they do not even notice that they are hurting others. Or they do notice, but they don't think it matters because the other people that are hurt are bad people who deserve it. Now, other people are basically good people who like to play or fantasize at being bad people because it's thrilling and forbidden. And then there are people who work hard at actually being, bad people because it's sort of exciting and provocative and makes the bad one feel a bit important and scary and powerful, like a sort of superhuman. Now, if you ask me, the whole good versus bad drama that goes on and on and on in the world today, and which seems to be endlessly exciting to a lot of people, is a bit too much. Obsession stems from it, harmful actions stem from it, bad self-esteem stems from it, abuse stems from it, wars stem from it, internal struggles stem from it. Am I good or bad? Oh, I'm good. I'm bad. Oh, I'm good and all the bad people are going to hell. Oh, I'm bad and all the good people are sheep, and really I'm so frightened inside that I have to feed on other people's fare to feel powerful. Frankly, I'm starting to find the whole thing a bit boring. But there you go. If you're into good, bad polarization on any level, go ahead. I'm not trying to tell you how to think. I'm just saying this as an introduction to the subject of this video on Norse myths, and I ended up having a little outburst. My big point here is that the good versus bad way of thinking is something we take so much for granted that we may fail to understand the spirituality and the mindset of previous cultures. I would like you to go with me on a little mind exercise now. What I want you to try and do now is to try and imagine a world in which the good versus evil problem is non-existent. Try and imagine a world where people simply do not think in those terms. Try and imagine a world where the closest thing you get to the good versus evil thing is the difference between what is wanted and what is not wanted. And then realize that what is wanted or not wanted simply depends on who you are and where you are in life at any given moment. And thus the distinction is fluid and cannot be compared to good versus bad thinking at all. Now, try and imagine that kind of world and that state of mind, and then try not to judge whether that is a good or a bad thing. It is difficult, I know, but try, and the closer you get to imagining what that kind of mind and that kind of world would be like, the closer you're getting to the mind and world of our pagan ancestors. As I said in the previous video, Snorri had to adapt the Norse myths to his contemporary public. He had to make the quite alien world of the ancestral deities into something comprehensible and acceptable to a Christian medieval reader. Thus, he presented a Norse pagan world in a good versus bad, evil manner that has stuck ever since, because almost all readers were ready to see a world in which some people were good and other people were bad, and no other kind of world was an option. So Snorri was trying to save the poetic and the mythical heritage of the past by saying that the ancestors were not bad people because they were pagans. They were just ignorant. They genuinely believed that their gods were good. Hence, we have learned that there were gods that were perceived as good and gods that people prayed to and made rituals for, versus giants and trolls that were demonic and bad and evil. And this idea sticks no matter what else you read, no matter how complex things really are in the myths, no matter how many intermarriages and other exchanges that take place between the gods and the giants and so forth, not to say the fact that all the gods are descended from the giants. The fact is that Norse pagans did not divide their sacred world into a pantheon of good gods versus a myriad of bad demonic giants. They didn't make distinctions like that. The fact is that the Norse cosmos was populated by countless entities, so-called maktar, the forces, that had more or less influence over different aspects of existence. Giants and giantesses received homage and sacrifice during the Viking Age. The fact is that the entities we refer to as Norse gods and goddesses were really just a tribe of maktar, of ruling forces among many tribes of maktar. Maktar means ruling forces or powers. They were the tribe known as the Æsir, and another tribe of ruling forces were the Vanir, also usually understood by us as gods and goddesses. And a third tribe of ruling forces are the giants. Yes, the giants were considered ruling forces just the same as the Æsir and the Vanir, and people sacrificed to giants and prayed to giants just as they prayed and sacrificed to the Æsir and the Vanir. The same was the case with elves, but the dark elves and light elves received homage and sacrifice, even the little underground gnomes, and of course the myriad tribes of female fate goddesses. To the Norse pagan, as with many other pagan cultures, I think, the cosmos was ruled by an endless variety of known and unknown forces, some of them closer and more beneficial to human beings than others, but people did not divide them into angelic or demonic beings. They just related to these forces in a pragmatic manner and would not dismiss any kind of being that may possess power over one's fate. Another stereotypical idea that has to be torn down soon is the hierarchy of the Asl Pantheon. Snorri told us that Odin was the king and patriarch of the gods, and that he named other gods. And then he named other gods and their wives who were below Odin, like noblemen below the king. Ever since, people have believed that the Norse people really believed in such a simple hierarchic divine system. In reality, Odin, I hate to say that because I really like Odin, but he was a relatively minor god on the whole. In Norway and Sweden, Thor and Frey were by far more important than Odin. Frey was the prototypical king, the ancestor of the Swedish royal lines, and he received a lot of attention everywhere because he ruled the fertility of the land and the sexual vitality of men, and this was considered more important than anything else. Thor was the god that held most appeal to Norwegian and Icelandic peasant warriors during the Viking Age, and goddess Freya was supreme among women and also referred by men and worshipped by kings. Njord and his sister Njerd, more famously known as Nerthus, were extremely important gods in southern Scandinavia from time immemorial, although they hardly appear in the myths that are left to us at all. Likewise, in northern regions of Scandinavia, Skadi and Ullr, the goddess and god of hunting, were ancient gods whose cults were widespread all over the place. But they too receive little space in the non-myths. And we must not forget Tyr, the god of war, an ancient Germanic god that held a much more prominent place in the religion than he is given in the myths that are left to us. And of course, you have the Disir, the female forces as a whole collective, and the mysterious elves. These collectives of beings had important annual celebrations that gathered the whole country and all rulers, people who were otherwise separated. But Snorri fails to mention them as more than an afterthought. On the other hand, you have gods and goddesses that are extremely important characters in the myths, and it is puzzling to realize that these characters are only known from the myths, that important deities like Loki and Balder are simply poetic inventions that serve a poetic and metaphorical function. At least they were not worshipped in any cult known to us. Now, Odin, who is risen to such a prominent place by Snorri, was indeed considered the ancestor of certain royal lines in Denmark and Norway, and to these clans he was a very important leader of battle and war. But in the whole of Scandinavia, Odin was a queer god of particular people, such as poets, priests and shamans. You would have to be into esoteric and spiritual stuff to consider him the most important god. Now Snorri, who himself was a poet, obviously thought that Odin was the highest god, but his rendering of the Norse myths shows very clearly what god received the most attention in Iceland toward the end of the pagan era, and that was Thor, god of thunder, protection and the guardian of sanctuaries. And the other most important god in that time was Freya. In the year 1225 AD, Snorri relates how she is the only deity that is still alive and still performing rituals as a blodgudja, as a sacrificial priestess. And this may of course have something to do with how Freya was the only deity that was considered immortal. But many scholars believe that the worship of Freya was still secretly operating by the time Snorri wrote his book in 1225, and that this was what he was referring to. So to finish this part, next time I will delve deeper into the subject of the maktar, the various ruling forces. For now, if you read Norse mythology, keep this in mind. There is no battle between good and evil in the Norse myths. Try and look beyond that veil and you will better understand the lore of the past. There are no clear-cut hierarchies in the divine pantheon of our ancestors. There are just complex entities that may or may not be beneficial in different situations. The Norse man and woman lived in a world populated by an endless variety of aspects of a unified whole. And I guess that's all for today. Have a nice day.